Hello and welcome to Nullitaire Gaming, where we play games with 0 players, or in other words, we play bots against one another. And in this series, we're playing People Power, Insurgency in the Philippines, 1981 to 1986, which is part of the Coin series. It's volume 11 by Kenneth T. And we've already started the game. If you haven't seen the first few videos in the series, I recommend going back and watching those. I will leave a link to the full playlist in the description of this video, so you can go and start at the beginning if you like. Okay, so let's set up the game from where we were, and we'll continue on. Okay, the game is set up. This is the current state of the board where we left off last time. We're in the middle of the 1983 campaign. I usually like to end videos on an election round. When I'm doing a coin game anyway. But we didn't last time. We ended kind of in the middle because the video was getting kind of long. So anyway, we're in the middle of the campaign, and the NPA and the reformers are both active, and the government is inactive right now. And so we'll draw the next card and continue on. The next card is Barangay Organizing Committees. The NPA is first eligible, and this is a critical event for them. You can see the shadow behind their icon, okay, showing that this is a critical event for them. So we need to see if this is also an effective event for them. Okay. Oh, this one had an errata. Okay. So shadow government, NPA agitate as if support phase of election round, removing terror and protest for free. All right, well, looking at the support phase of the election round, agitation, in spaces with NPA control, every 1 resource spent removes 1 terror or protest, or, once no more terror or protest present, shifts the space 1 level toward resistance. Okay, so this can only be done in spaces with NPA control, and it does 3 possible things: removing terror, removing protest, and shifting toward resistance. Well, the only spaces with NPA control right now are Visayas, which is already at resistance, and there's no terror or any protest going on there, and Central Mindanao, which is also at resistance, and there's no terror or strike going on right now. Excuse me, no terror or protest going on right now. All right, so this event won't do anything. Agitation won't actually do anything. All right, so this is not an effective event, so they're not going to choose it. So here's the next card for the NPA, and it says 3d6 is greater than resistance plus NPA bases on the map. Well, resistance plus NPA basis is now at 5, and they rolled a 5. All right, so the 5 that they rolled is not greater than resistance plus NPA basis, so they're going to draw another card. So this is the next Bonifacio card for the NPA. It says government control in any 2+ population spaces. Yes, that's definitely the case. So yes, follow the green arrow. 4+ guerrillas in any space with a vulnerable government base or government control. No, there's no spaces on the board that even have 4 or more guerrillas in them. Okay, so we'll flip the card. And now 1d6 is less than or equal to available guerrillas. The answer to that will be no, because there are 12, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13 available guerrillas. Oh, actually, no, the answer is yes. 1d6 will be less than or equal to, yeah, okay. So no matter what is rolled, that will be less than or equal to the available guerrillas. Okay, so the answer is yes. Okay, they're going to rally. All right, only make an activation number roll after placing guerrillas. So they're going to try to place a base where there are 3 more guerrillas. There's no such place right now. Then place a base where there are 2 or more guerrillas. There's no such space with 2 or more either. So now select spaces using place guerrillas. Okay, so when I went to look at the rally operation, I noticed my scrap of post-it note there. And I always do that to remind me that something unusual is going on here. So I was reminded that Jose Maria Sison is in play for the NPA, which says the NPA rally may replace one guerrilla with a base in countryside spaces. Okay, so that is a modification of the rally operation in terms of what bases they place. So we need to read this differently than how I just read it. Okay, so instead of reading it like that, we need to modify it according to this personality. And the way that we modify it is here in the Bonifacio rulebook under Jose Maria Sison here. Okay, so when rallying NP, that is non-player NPA, NPNPA, non-player NPA, will first place bases in countryside spaces where two or more guerrillas or one or more guerrillas and no cubes, and remove only one guerrilla to do so as per the usual rules for this personality. Okay, so instead of doing it the way it's done here, we now do it the way it says here. So first place bases in countryside spaces where two or more guerrillas, well, there's no such place, or one or more guerrilla and no cubes. Ah, there is such a space there, namely Central Mindanao. Okay, so that's where they're going to rally first to try to place a base. Oh, but wait. there are already two bases there, so they can't do that. Okay, so they don't place any bases. Okay, so even with the modification from this personality, they still don't place any bases. Okay, so now they're going to rally using the place guerrillas priorities. Okay, so the first priority for place guerrillas is vulnerable NPA base. And there is one. Right here in Visayas, that base is not protected by any guerrillas at all, so they're going to rally there first. Since there's a base there, they get to place guerrillas up to bases plus population. So they place two there, and that costs them one resource. Now the NPA have to roll against the activation number to see if they will choose more spaces. The activation number is 2, and they rolled a 2. Okay, so they did not beat the activation number, which means that they do not select any more spaces. Alright, so they'll move on to their special activity. They'll extort in one space with the most underground guerrillas, and at an NPA base only where two or more underground guerrillas. Well, clearly the space with the most underground guerrillas is Visayas, and it has a base, but there are two or more, so they will extort here. So, per the instructions, they simply activate a guerrilla and add one resource. Alright, so that's the end of the NPA turn. They used an op and special activity, so they go there. Okay, it's Reformer's turn now, and they're not interested in this event, which leaves us with an interesting problem, because the Reformers don't have any resources. They're at 0. And I've said in previous videos that the way these bots are written is such that they don't track resources at all, which I don't like. That's what I call a cheater rule. I don't like bots who cheat. I want bots who play by the rules, just like a human player does. So that rule I have ignored, and I've been forcing the bots to track resources anyway. Therefore, that means that the bots are not written in such a way that they can handle a case like this, where the bot runs out of resources. So we have to do a little bit of interpretation here to figure out what to do. Okay, this has happened before with the Reformers, I think. And I said, well, let's go here to the rulebook first. The rulebook for the Bonifacio system says here, in rare cases, there might be no Bonifacio cards with eligible operations, in which case the NPA faction will pass. Okay, and so that meant for us, well, if they're at 0 resources, well, that means there's no operation they could do. So we just imagine that they've gone through the entire deck, the Bonifacio deck, and tried to do each operation, but not having any resources. They were never able to do any. And so they cycle through the entire deck, not finding one, and then they pass. Okay, but I think I pointed out before that, some of these bots have, some of these factions have other ways of getting resources besides passing. And the reformers do. They have this appeal special ability, which allows them to remove some activists and gain some resources for doing so. So it's not an auto pass or anything, when they're at 0 resources, because it's possible that going through the Bonifacio deck, they might find an instruction that has them do a special ability, which could be appeal, gain some resources from that, and then do an operation afterwards, spending resources to do that. So that's possible. That could happen. Prior to the 1983 campaign, though, it's not been possible for the reformers, and that's because if we go through the deck and look at all the reformers' cards, whenever they use appeal in the instructions, it always says 1983 campaign or later. So before the 1983 campaign, the reformer bot would never choose to appeal. But now we are in the 1983 campaign, so it is possible now that the reformer bot will choose to appeal. The question is, do they ever have any instructions where they do a special activity first, which might be appeal, and then an operation? And the answer to that is yes. Here's a card that does exactly that. So if we'd follow, if the red arrow here were selected in the flowchart, then the reformers would perform a special activity first, and appeal is one of the possibilities, and then they would perform an operation. Okay, so that is possible now. That was not possible before for the reformers to do that. And so before the 1983 campaign, whenever they had 0 resources, it was auto pass. Not so anymore. Okay, so now what I'll need to do is work through the Bonifacio deck and see if they ever, given the state of the board as it is, see if they ever come to a point where they do a special activity first, and its appeal, and then they do an operation after. If that case never comes up, and we cycle through the entire deck, okay, then it's a pass. Then they'll pass. Okay, so we need to check and see if that will happen. So I'm going to do that now, and I'll tell you the results. Okay, so I went through the entire deck and went through the flow charts and everything, and they never found any opportunity to select a special activity first through that procedure. So they came right back to the first card they had. Therefore, this rule is in effect. There's no cards with eligible operations, so they will pass. Okay, so the reformers will pass and gain 1 resource. The next card is National Day of Sorrow, and the reformers are up again. First, this time they've got some resources, so they might be able to do something. Alright, well, they're not interested in this event. It's not critical for them. So they're going to look to the Bonifacio deck. Okay, here's their next card. So it says 3d6 greater than opposition plus reformer bases on the map. Opposition plus bases is at 3, so I had to roll to make sure they don't roll a 3. And they rolled way more than that. So the answer is yes. 2 or more activists in any space with room for an available base and not at support. No, there are no spaces with more than 1 activist right now. So they will flip this card over. And now, activists in any space with no terror or strike and not at opposition. Yeah, sure, there's several places like that. Several spaces like that. So they're going to protest. Okay, first they'll select a government base with no cubes. There's no such place. So now they're just going to use their protest priorities. Okay, there's my sticky note on the protest box, so that tells me something unusual is happening. And here it's the election card, which says protest set spaces to opposition instead of shifting. So we've got to keep that in mind during this operation. Alright, so they're going to choose which space to protest given these priorities. First, government control. Well, that narrows it down somewhat to just Davao and Manila. Those are the only 2 spaces now that they could select, because they have activists. Oops. In those spaces. Okay, so that means these spaces are all out now. All right, so just Manila and Davao left. Okay, keep going here. Next space not at opposition. Neither of those spaces are at opposition. Most population. Okay, well, as expected, it's going to be Manila where they're going to protest. So the Reformers place a protest in that space, which activates their activist, and then the space gets automatically set to opposition because of the election card. All right, that cost them one resource, and now they're broke again. So they can't select another protest, even if they wanted to, so there's no point in doing the activation roll. We'll just go on to the special activity. Okay, they're going to try to convert in up to 2 spaces with protest. First, to replace a government base. I don't think they're going to be able to do that. I have to check. No, definitely not. So here's what convert says. You need to select a space with activists, with active activists in government pieces. So Manila is the only possible space. In each space, remove 2 cubes or replace one with an activist. Or if government base without cubes, replace a government base with reformer base. -1 patronage per selected space. -2 instead if government base removed or replaced. Okay, so the base there is heavily protected, so obviously can't remove a base. Okay, so moving down here. Then remove 2 cubes using remove or replace. Okay, so they're going to try to do that. Okay, well they don't need to use their priorities to select a space, because clearly there's only one space to select from. But we do need to figure out which cubes they're going to remove, police or troops. And here in the peace priorities we see the reformers remove police first. Okay, so they're going to remove 2 police from that space. And the government loses 1 patronage, which means their victory condition is now at 11 points. Okay, the government is next eligible. This is not a critical event for them. And they're only being offered, since they're not going to take the event, they're only offered an operation, which means they're going to go for a limited operation. Here's the next Bonifacio card for the government. 1d6 less than or equal to available cubes. Well, the government does have some cubes available now, those 2 police that were just sent back from Manila. So they did have to roll on that, but they rolled a 6. Okay, so the answer is no. They'll draw a new card. Here's the next card. Any spaces without government control? Sure, lots of spaces have no government control. Okay, so any 2+ population space with control, troops, police, and no support, protest, or strike. Yes, there are several spaces like that, with at least 2 population. The government has control. They have troops and police there, and they don't have support, protest, or strike. Okay, so they're going to select spaces using place cubes for train. So they can train in any city and any countryside spaces with government control or a government base. So that essentially means all the cities, in addition to northern Luzon, are eligible for train. And so I've marked all of those, and now we'll go to place cubes to find out priority. Okay, first one is no government control. Those are all under government control. Then vulnerable base of any faction. There are no vulnerable bases anywhere. Okay, then most population. So that means Manila. So those 2 police are added back into Manila, and the government has to pay 2 resources for that. Okay, well now they're out of cubes, so they can't place any more. And this is a limited operation, so they can't select any more spaces anyway. Okay, so but we need to check and see if they can do more with train in Manila. And it turns out they can't, because civic action requires that there be no protest in the space. So train here says, if troops, police did no protest or strike and government control by civic action. Okay, so the government can't buy civic action in that space, which is, weird, because that's clearly what sent the bot into doing train, was the desire to use civic action. Right? That's why it had us check to see if there was a space with control, troops, police, and no support, protesters, strike. And there are, except when we went, there are such spaces, so we answered yes to that. Manila isn't one of them, but we answered yes to that. But when we selected spaces using place cubes, well, then Manila got selected for having the highest population. But they can't do civic action there. So this is a case where, you know, the way the flowcharts are written is maybe not ideal. Maybe not, you know, maybe this could be improved upon. But in any case, you know, that's the way it goes. When you're just using these flowcharts, sometimes the bots end up doing things that are suboptimal. All right, but anyway, that's all the government is going to be able to do in this turn, so that's going to be a limited operation. The next card is Ninoy speaks against Marcos, which is quite a trick since Ninoy Aquino was murdered at the beginning of this campaign. So, you know, that's the way it goes with these games, you know. You lose a little bit of historical realism for the sake of an abstract game. All right, so the reformers are ineligible right now, so NPA will be the first to act, and they're not interested in this event. Okay, so we'll go to the Bonifacio deck here to look for an op and special activity. All right, first thing, 3d6 is greater than resistance plus NPA bases on the map. Well, resistance plus bases is at 5, so they had to roll on that, and they rolled quite a bit more than 5. Okay, so the answer to that is yes. All right, underground guerrillas in or adjacent to any city with no terror, resistance, or support, and may perform special activity. Yeah, that's true. Okay, so it looks like they're going to march using the move priorities. Alright, so we're going to use the move priorities table once again. I just want to point out something. This has happened before with the NPA, and I want to just mention it again. You know, what has led us to this point in the Bonifacio card was answering this question in the affirmative. An underground guerrilla in or adjacent to any city with no terror, resistance, or support and may perform a special activity. The answer to that is yes, but only because of that guerrilla right up there in northern Luzon, which is adjacent to Manila. Okay, Manila has no terror, no resistance, no support in it. So that's the guerrilla that forced us to say yes to the question. But the thing is, I already know that the NPA are not going to move that guerrilla. Because I've been through this before, you know, using these move priorities. I know that they want to keep that guerrilla there because, I think it's this one. Yeah, keep underground one guerrilla in 2+ population spaces with no resistance. So because there's no resistance there, they're not going to move that guerrilla. So I already know that. So even though that's the piece that forced a positive, an affirmative answer to this question, that is not actually going to happen. You know, with the flow chart here, clearly the idea is to come down here and do a special activity, right? Do a strike there in Manila, but they're not going to do it because they don't move that piece. Anyway, that's the way it goes with these bots. So we're going to end up probably selecting some piece from down here and not really doing maybe not really doing what this card intends for the NPA to do. Anyway, that's the way it goes. So we're going to have to go through the tedium, like I said before in a previous video, of trying to select places for the NPA to move. And it's weird because the NPA, the way they march is they march from origin spaces. Right? So they select an origin space and then they can move from there, you know, to several different places just by paying for that origin space. But the way the move priorities work, you have to select destinations first. So it's a bit awkward with the NPA. You have to select a destination and then see if any pieces can move there according to March. All right, so it's a bit tedious, but I'll go through it and figure out where the NPA will move. So just to make it a little bit clearer what I mean by the tediousness and awkwardness of this is because the way I typically work out what the bots will do is I go to the to the operation and I see, okay, location, any spaces with Koreas in this case. That's March. But that's all the origin spaces that are possible for March, not the destination spaces that are possible, which is actually what I need to understand for the move priorities. Right? I need to figure out destinations first. So actually, we need to think about not only those spaces, but every space adjacent to those spaces. Those are also possible, possible move destinations. Okay, so I think that does it. All right, so those are all the possible spaces. Now we'll see if they move to any of them. Well, as expected, the NPA selected Manila first, and they weren't able to actually do it because the only adjacent Korea is that one in northern Luzon, which can't move. Okay, so eventually, resetting, going back to the drawing board, they eventually selected Cebu, which they can march into from Visayas. Okay, so now we will go down the move priorities to find out what pieces will move. Okay, so first of all, so going down the NPA side here, keep sufficient pieces to change no government control in 2+ population spaces. Okay, well, we're not dealing with a, Visayas is not a 2+ population space, so no problem. Here, keep 1 underground Korea in spaces with an NPA base. Okay, so this underground Korea has to stay here. So only this activated Korea here can move. Okay. Keep underground 1 Korea in 2+ population spaces with no resistance. This is not a 2 population space. Keep 1 Korea in spaces with strike. There's no strike here. Okay, keep 3 acting faction Koreas or activists in spaces with no support and room for an available base. Well, there is room for an available base and there's no support here, but there aren't at least 3. And with the keep priorities, we're told if you can't do them completely, then you just ignore it. And they can't do that completely, so they'll ignore it. Alright, so now let's see if they'll actually move that piece using the get to priorities. Get 1 acting faction Korea or activist in destination. Okay, so they just have to move 1 into the destination, period. Okay, so that will do it right there. This piece will move in there. It's already activated, so there's no question about whether or not it will be activated. I think it probably would in this case. Since the destination is at support and moving Koreas plus cubes exceeds 3, yeah, it would have to be activated anyway. So there you go. The NPA move from Visayas to Cebu, and that cost them 1 resource. We should check and see if the NPA will choose any more spaces for move. So they have to roll on the activation number, and they rolled a 2. Okay, so that's not higher than 2, therefore they won't choose any more spaces. Okay, moving on to special activity then. They would like to strike up to 2 cities using shift toward resistance. Problem is they can't strike because that can only be done in cities with an underground NPA Korea. And right now there aren't any. Cebu is the only city with NPA Koreas and they're all activated. The next priority is ambush for special activity, but that's also going to be a problem because ambush says any space where a Korea who marched or is about to attack is underground. Well, a Korea did just march, but it is not underground, so that won't work. Okay, so we get to the final possibility for special activity. Extort in 1 space with the most underground Koreas. Well, the problem with that is it must be done in a space without government control with an underground Korea. Okay, so this one's not eligible because there's government control. These 2 are eligible, the 1 Korea in central Mindanao and the 1 Korea in Visayas, but there are bases there, and we're told here where there are NPA bases only where there are 2 or more underground Koreas, and that's not the case here. Alright, so the NPA are not going to choose a special activity, and they only marched from 1 origin space, so that means they ended up doing a limited operation. It's the government turn now. They're not interested in the event, so they will go for an op and special activity. So, first priority, 1d6 is less than or equal to available cubes. Well, there are no available cubes. So no matter what the roll is, the answer is no. We'll draw a new card. This is the next card. Any 2+ population space without government control. Yes. Eastern Mindanao is such a space? The answer is yes. 1d6 less than or equal to available cubes. No, because there are no available cubes. So we flip the card. On the other side we see, just going to do a sweep. Okay, so the government would like to do a sweep operation. So for the government sweep, we can select any space. Alright, so I've started by putting a pawn in every space, so every space is eligible right now. And so using the move priorities here, we need to select a destination. We'll do that using the space selection priorities table first. Okay. Alright, so a sweep destination. First they want a space with no government control. Okay, so that narrows it down. Alright, so that narrows down the options for a destination. We continue on. Next, a vulnerable base of any faction. I don't believe there are any vulnerable bases. No. Okay. So most population. Well, that narrows it down again. It would be Eastern Mindanao. So Eastern Mindanao is selected as a sweep destination, which is totally weird because there aren't any NPA pieces there even to be activated, so that would be a rather strange thing to do, to sweep, to move in here using sweep. But anyway, the only adjacent government pieces are in Davao, and of course those pieces are not going to move. So looking at the keep priorities, we get down to here, keep 2 cubes in spaces with a government base. Okay, so those aren't going to move. Therefore, they're not going to sweep into that destination, and they'll just continue on trying to choose one from these 4 that are left. Okay, so still in sweep destination, thinking about most population now. All the ones left are at 1 population, so that's not going to do anything. Fewest enemy pieces. Well, I mean, fewest enemy pieces would be 0, wouldn't it? Right? I mean, Western Mindanao and Southern Luzon have no enemy pieces in them at all. So I guess that would be, we'd narrow it down to those 2. Okay. That's fewest enemy pieces. Sweep destination. Okay, finally, select at random from the remaining spaces. Okay, well there you go. They're going to select randomly from Southern Luzon and Western Mindanao. Okay, so I made Southern Luzon 1, 2, 3, and I've made Western Mindanao 4, 5, 6, and rolled on that and got a 3. Okay, so the selection is Southern Luzon, but I can already see that's not going to work. They can't move those 2 cubes from Northern Luzon because there's a base there and you have to leave at least 2 cubes. And they're not going to be able to move any pieces from Manila either because there's a protest in that space. They can't move pieces. Pretty sure it says that here. Move cubes from any spaces without protest or strike into selected spaces. Okay, so they can't sweep by moving out of a space with a protest in it. So they're not actually going to be able to move any pieces there. Okay, so that didn't work. So I think we're stuck with Western Mindanao as the only possible space left they could sweep into. And it looks like they may be able to move one of these police here from Zamboanga because they're going to have to leave 2 pieces there. But let's check that and see what happens. So we'll go through the keep priorities here one at a time. So keep sufficient pieces to change no government control in 2+ population spaces. Okay, so they can move all 3 of their cubes there and they'd still have control. Okay, keep government firepower greater than or equal to vulnerable NPA pieces. There are no NPA there. Keep police greater than or equal to vulnerable reformer pieces. There are no reformer pieces. Keep 2 cubes in space with a government base. Okay, so they have to keep 2 cubes there. Keep 1 cube in spaces with government base and activists. There are no activists there. Keep government pieces greater than enemy pieces in Manila. Okay, this is at Manila. Okay, that's it. Alright, well they have to keep 2 cubes there. So I think that means they'll move the police, but I'll check on that. I'll have to check. Okay, here's our answer. The piece priorities table. Here it says read top down and left to right to remove, replace, or activate enemy pieces and place or move friendly pieces. Okay, so you read top down, left to right. So for cubes, the government alternates police, then troops. Alright, so they'll move the police first. That's it. They've moved into Western Mindanao, which gives them control of Western Mindanao. Now that costs them 2 resources. I don't think they'll be able to do anything more with this. It says, in each destination space, activate 1 guerrilla per 2 troops present. Okay, well, there are no troops there, and there's no MPA anyway. Okay, so that's it for that sweep. So now I have to roll against the activation number to see if they will continue on selecting spaces for sweep. And they rolled a 5, which is greater than 3. Okay, so they'll continue on. Well, so they would try to select another space using move priorities. I don't think they're going to be able to select any other spaces using move priorities, but I'm going to go through it anyway and check to make sure that is the case. Well, it turns out there is one more thing they can do using the move priorities, and it's to move one of these police from Cebu into Visayas, which I think they are going to do. The thing is, with these move priorities, it's interesting because you select a space and then you go down the keep priorities, and then you find out, oh well, that space won't actually work. And then what do? Well, the way I figure it, you go back to the destination priorities, and you just remove that one from consideration and go back to where you were and try to select another one. And then you just go for the next priority and then try again. See if something can move. And you just keep doing that until you either run out of spaces or you find some space that works. So this one eventually they got around to, and it does work. Okay, so let's just make sure by going through the keep priorities here. Okay, so keep sufficient pieces to change no government control in 2+ population spaces. Okay, well, if they move that police cube out of Cebu, they'll still have control because they have a base there. So that's okay. Okay, next thing is keep government firepower greater than or equal to vulnerable NPA pieces. Well, there are 2 vulnerable NPA pieces, and if we move that 1 police, then the government firepower will be 2, because this is a city. Every cube counts toward firepower in a city. And so that will be equal to or greater than. So that's fine. Keep police greater than or equal to vulnerable reformer pieces. There are no reformer pieces, so that's fine. Keep 2 cubes in spaces with a government base. Yes, there's a government base, but there would still be 2 cubes there, so that's fine. Keep 1 cube in spaces with government base and activist. Okay, there are no activists there. Keep government pieces greater than enemy pieces in Manila. This isn't Manila. Okay, so that works. And then when we come, so we don't have to keep that police cube in Cebu. So let's just make sure that it will actually move now. So these are the get priorities. Get government firepower equal to NPA pieces. Well, moving that police here won't do that because police don't count in countryside spaces toward firepower. Because firepower is determined by the assault operation. So it's how many pieces, how many NPA pieces could be removed using an assault. Okay, and it says in each space remove 1 active NPA piece per troop if countryside, per cube if city. Okay, so essentially police don't count toward firepower in the countryside, but they do count toward firepower in the city. Alright, so that priority doesn't do anything here. That doesn't require us to move that police. Get police equal to active reformer pieces. Well, there's a reformer piece in Visayas, but it's not active, so that doesn't do anything. Get control and destination. That 1 police won't do that, so that doesn't do anything. If destination is at support, it isn't, so that doesn't do anything. Get 1 police and 1 troop in destination. Okay, well, we can't do it entirely, but we can do it partially, and the get priorities you do as much as you can. So get 1 police into the destination. So that means the government will move that 1 piece into Visayas, and it will cost them 2 resources. Now they can't Sweep says in each destination space, activate one guerrilla per 2 troops present. Well, they didn't move any troops, so that won't do anything. So now the government has to roll against their activation number again, and this time they rolled a 4, which is higher than 3. So they can try to select more spaces for sweep. Now, using the move priorities, I know that's not going to work now, for sure, because none of the pieces left that haven't been moved already could possibly move. These 2 in Zamboanga couldn't move because they have to stay with that base. These 2 cubes have to stay with every base. Same with Davao. Same with Northern Luzon. None of those pieces in Manila can move because there's a protest there. Cebu also has 2 cubes with a base, so those can't move. These 2 can't move because they've already moved this turn. Okay, so there's no cubes left on the board that could possibly move. Okay, so we'll move on to the next priority here, which says sweep in place to activate underground NPA guerrillas with NPA bases using sweep destination. Well, there are no spaces on the map that satisfy that. Even though there are spaces with NPA bases and underground guerrillas, there aren't at least 2 troops in any of those spaces, which you need for sweep. So that won't do anything. Last priority, sweep in place to activate underground NPA guerrillas using sweep destination. So now, look for places where we don't even care if there's a base. Well, potentially Northern Luzon would count, but again, there aren't 2 troops there, and this is a countryside space where you need at least 2 troops. Actually, I think with sweep, it doesn't matter. You need 2 troops in any case. Oh no, 2 cubes if it's a city. So you could use police in a city. But anyway, you need 2 troops there for that, so that wouldn't work. There are no government pieces here at all, so that wouldn't work. You need at least 2 troops here, so that wouldn't work. Okay, in any case, what that all boils down to is even though they want to select more spaces, they can't. Alright, so they're going to move on to their special activity. This is later than the 83 campaign, so they can enrich in one space with activists or underground guerrillas using enrich. So let's check that. Alright, so that didn't do anything because we were looking for a space where they can enrich. It requires a space with government control and support, but not Manila, which they don't have support in Manila anyway. So a space with government control and support. So that's just Cebu and Zamboanga. Those are the only 2. But we're looking for a space with an underground activist or an underground guerrilla. Oh, with an activist or an underground guerrilla. Well, neither of those spaces have that. There are guerrillas in Cebu, but they're not underground. And there are no activists anywhere. So that didn't work. Okay, so now they'd want to use charm in one space without support using shift towards support. So let's see if they'll do that. So charm can be done in any space with government control. So that's all these spaces are possible. And so they're going to select among them using their shift towards support priorities. Okay, so using shift towards support, that's here. First is if the reformers are a player, I treat all the bots as players, so yes. If the space is at opposition. Well, there is one of those spaces at opposition, namely Manila. That's at opposition. So they're going to try to charm in Manila. Okay, charm says spend 1 patronage, then shift the space 1 level towards support, then aid +3. Alright, so this is going to cost the government 1 patronage, which is a hit to their victory conditions. They'll shift it 1 level towards support, which means it goes to neutral. Okay, so that means the reformers lose 5 support now. They're back down to 3 support. And then aid goes up 3. So aid is now at 6. Okay, there we go. Okay, that's finally the end of the government turn. It took some doing. But they ended up taking it up in special activity. So they're there. Okay, so on to the next card. The NPA and the reformers are eligible and the government is ineligible. And the next card is San Miguel Corporation. Okay, government is not eligible, so NPA will be the first to act. And they don't want this event's not critical for them, so they'll try for an op and special activity. So here's the next card for the NPA. 3d6 greater than resistance plus NPA bases on the map. The NPA victory conditions right now are at 5 victory points. So they had to roll on that. They rolled way more than a 5. So the answer is yes. Okay, 2 or more Guerrillas in any space with room for an available base and no support. No, that's not true right now. Although there are 2 or more Guerrillas in Cebu, and there is room for another base there, but it's at support, so that won't work. And I thought, well, it's interesting because the NPA might want to choose Rally to place a base because Jose Maria Cizon is in play, and he makes it such that Rally may replace 1 guerrilla with a base. So I was thinking, well, maybe the NPA would think of this question differently, But the rule book just says, here it says when rallying. So it doesn't make any modifications to any of the questions. So we still answer the questions as usual. It's just that if they happen to choose rally, then they can do it in this modified way. Okay, but they still have to satisfy these requirements to get there, and they don't. Okay, so we're going to flip the card over and go to this side. Underground guerrillas in any 2+ population space not at resistance. Yeah, that's true. Right, Northern Luzon is like that. There's an underground guerrilla there. It's a 2+ population space, and it's not at resistance. Yeah, so that's true. Okay, so they're going to try to use terror. Okay, select spaces without resistance using place terror. And where there's a base, only where there's 2 underground guerrillas. The terror operation can only select spaces with underground guerrillas. So, looking at the map, there were 3 such spaces. However, Visayas and Central Mindanao have bases and don't have at least 2 underground guerrillas. So by the priorities here, it says where there's an NPA base, only where there's 2 or more underground guerrillas. That means the only possible place they could do this is Northern Luzon. Okay, so they're going to do terror in Northern Luzon. In each space, activate 1 underground guerrilla, remove protest or strike marker if any, and place terror marker if none. Shift 1 level toward resistance. So Northern Luzon is now at resistance. It was neutral before. We have a terror marker there. The guerrilla has been activated. So now the NPA's victory points are now at 7, but they're at 0 resources. Okay, so that means they don't have to bother rolling on the activation number to see if they'll choose another space. For terror, they can't afford it. Okay, so we'll go on to a special activity. Extort in 1 space with the most underground guerrillas. At an NPA base, only where 2 or more. Alright, well, the only underground guerrillas on the map now are at bases, and there aren't 2 or more there. Therefore, they will not extort. That means that they only selected 1 space to do an operation. They didn't do any special activity. Therefore, limited operation for them. The reformers are up next. Again, they aren't interested in the event, and they have no money. So we're in the same situation again, where I'll have to go through the deck, cycle through it, and see if they can find some case where they use a special activity first and can get some resources. And if not, then they'll have cycled through the entire deck, and that means they'll pass. So I'll check and see if they manage to choose anything that will get them some resources. So I went through the entire deck. I never found any place where the reformers did a special activity first. Okay, just following the flow charts through. They always wanted to choose an operation first through every card, so they weren't able to do that simply because they didn't have the money. That means they will pass and take 1 resource. The next card is the 1984 parliamentary election. So time for an election round. Okay, we start the election round with the victory check first, so we'll go through these procedures, starting with strike. -1 patronage per strike on the map. There are no strikes on the map, so that does nothing. Acts of desperation. If final election round, resolve acts of desperation in order from lowest to highest margin of victory. Okay, this is not the final election round. Acts of desperation are not in play right now. Okay, victory check. If any faction has met its victory conditions, the game ends immediately. No, no faction has met their victory conditions. Right now the government is sitting at 10. They need at least 19. The reformers are at 3. They need at least 13. And the MPA are at 7. They need at least 14. Okay, so no faction has met their victory conditions. But wait. I'm coming to you from the future once again. I've made a pretty big blunder in this video. And I didn't recognize the blunder until after I'd completed the video and uploaded it to YouTube. But now I've discovered it weeks later when I have come back to the game to continue on with it. There was a miscount in the way that I did the election round in this video. So I'm coming back to this point in the game and redoing the election round. It was a big enough blunder, which you'll see in a moment, that it definitely changed an important outcome. So let me show you what it is. At the beginning of the election round, we're doing a victory check. Okay, so strike, -1 patronage per strike on the map. There aren't any acts of desperation. We're not in the final election round, so there are no acts of desperation. Now victory check. Okay, the problem is that the government victory marker is not in the right spot. That is tracking government support plus patronage, when it should be tracking government control plus patronage. Which is, it's easy to get confused on this because the NPA and the reformers are interested in resistance and opposition, right? The reformers, for example, their victory condition is opposition plus bases. So it's the amount of opposition they have on the board, the amount of population that are opposed on the board, plus the number of bases. So the reformers, for example, have 3 total on the board. They have 2 opposition here because of the population, and they have a base. So that's correct. They are at 3. That's their margin of victory right now. And similarly, the MPA track resistance plus bases. Okay, well, they have, 1 population worth of resistance here, plus 2 bases. There's another population's worth of resistance there, plus another base. And there's some 2 populations worth of resistance up there. So a total of 7. And therefore, this is correct. Okay, and neither one of those are high enough for their victory margins, which are up here. But if we correct this is control plus patronage, not support. The government actually doesn't really care about support, except insofar as it keeps, resistance and opposition down. But the government doesn't seem to care much whether the people actually support them. They're more interested in controlling the people. So their victory condition is patronage, which right now is at 6, plus the total control of population that the government have. So if we count all of that, it actually turns out to be 14. 2 there, 5 in Manila, that's 7. 2 more here in Cebu, that's 9. 2 more in Zamboanga, that's 11. 1 in Western Mindanao is 12. And 2 more in Davao is 14. Plus the 6 patronage means this should actually be way up here at 20, which is enough for the government to actually win at this point. Okay, so the government win the game right here. And I did not realize that because I wasn't tracking the government's victory condition properly. Again, I think it's an easy mistake to make. I mean, the other 2 factions are interested in resistance or opposition rather than in control, but the government is different. They're interested in control. So I just messed that up. And so if we fix it, the game actually ends right now. where the government win. Rather than the way I did it before, where I had it wrong and then I carried on and finished the whole election round and thought we were moving on to the next campaign. But that turns out to not be correct. Okay, well, there you have it. By fixing the victory condition, it now turns out that the government win. The game is over, and the government is victorious. Okay, so that's the end of the game. Well, there you have it, our game of people power. The Marcos regime remains in power at the end of the game, which ended somewhat unexpectedly, at least for me, because I thought the game was going to continue on, and here I am weeks later thinking I'm ready to go on with the game, and realized I made a mistake and the game actually ended weeks ago. Okay, anyway, that's the end of our game. The government wins. Okay, well, I hope you'll join me next time when we play another game, Nullitaire. Until then, see ya.